Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people go. Go down, Moses, way down in Egypt land. Tell old Pharaoh to let my people
Well, now that I just found out that I was muted the whole time, that's great. So I'm gonna go ahead and start my spill over again because yeah, apparently I had myself muted this whole time, and it's all good. So let me just go ahead and, like I said, if you watch it right now, appreciate it. I'm gonna go ahead and get right into it because I just realized I had myself muted the whole time. But it's all good. So once again, don't fall victim to bad doctrine because of confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is basically people's tendency to process information by looking for or interpreting information that is consistent with their existing beliefs. All right, I got that off Britannica. Okay, so let's see. What else did I got? Dang, it threw me off because I was muted for that whole beginning spiel. But hey, look, I ain't getting into nothing too deep yet. So basically, like I said, I feel like we've been taught wrong. So you telling me I was excited and I had everything right and I had all my good introduction and but it was muted. Okay, I'm gonna get over it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get right into it. But confirmation bias basically means like you hear something that you like, and because you like it, or it kind of relates to some way that you probably already believe, then you're more inclined to believe it, or you're more inclined to what's the word? You're more inclined to just go along with it, right? You won't necessarily question it. You'll just basically just say, "Hey, I like what that guy's saying," and you know what? Yeah, I felt that way before, so because of that,
don't ask. I said, don't ask. I said, don't ask. No question.
So a lot of times, man, it's it's just interesting that I see sometimes, man, like the things that people like believe. And I'm gonna give you three examples from the Bible of confirmation bias, kind of sort of playing into what I call indoctrination or bad indoctrination. You will take one scripture from the Bible and just ride with it and just believe it is always applicable, or as I call it, we have laws, statutes, and commandments, but then we also have recommendations. And a lot of times the recommendations try to get passed off as if they are law. So here's a couple of examples that I found. I'm pretty sure you could think of some other ones. Let's go to 1 Corinthians 11, 3 and 5. And it said, "But I would have you know, the head of every man is Christ, and the head of the woman is the man, and the head of Christ is God. Every man praying or prophesying, having his head covered, dishonors his head. But every woman that prayeth or prophesies with her head uncovered dishonoreth her head. For that is even all one as she were shaped." Okay? So, right there in 1 Corinthians, you can look at that multiple ways. I mean, honestly, 1 Corinthians, I know in like the what is it, the Jewish temples, right? They wear the yarmulke. So based on that, even though I know they only practice the first 5 books of the Bible, but based on that, it's almost basically saying that they're doing something wrong to pray with a yarmulke on. Okay, same thing like with a woman. It's saying a woman who does not cover her head when people are praying does the same thing. Now, once again, this is just the opinion of one man. It doesn't mean it's something that should be practiced as law. It doesn't mean that it is something that you know people should be recommending. I see a lot of sisters sometimes with their head covers, and I know the Quran teaches something different, right? I believe in the Quran, it is a law that you have to have your head covered. So if you're a Muslim, absolutely, if you're a woman, you need to have your head covered. But if you don't necessarily fall up under the Islamic faith, then I don't necessarily know why it will be a law that you have your hair covered, or a commandment or a mandate that you have it covered. I'm not saying I see anything wrong with it. However, I just think that it's just something that we shouldn't do. Like, the point of this show, what I've been trying to do, and once again, I apologize for the audio issue at the beginning, but it needs to come from a scholarly perspective. It needs to come from an academic perspective. You understand what I'm saying? Like, you should be able to go into a university, take out this book. You understand what I'm saying? And you should be able to go, if you want to try to prove anything, you should be able to go into that book and show why you believe it's real, why whatever, because if you can't, then that's going to be problematic, right? So we want to make sure that we're not just finding something we like and then just running with it, because it needs to be able to hold up to a lot of different things. Here's another one. 1 Timothy 2:11 and 13. Let the woman learn in silence with all subjection. But I suffer not a woman to teach, nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence. For Adam was first formed, then Eve. Once again, people will take that verse and basically be like, hey, I don't need my woman talking. You can't teach me nothing. You can't tell me nothing, whatever. Once again, recommendation versus something that you should be indoctrinating people with. I don't believe that should say like women can't teach, women can't, you know what I mean? Like you just sit over there and be quiet. I mean, sometimes that's, silence ain't bad. So once again, I get it, but at the same time, we can't put these opinions of, even though these are, you know, biblical men, we can't put their opinion so high as to make them say like, oh, women, just sit over there and quiet. This be, you know, it's a little ridiculous to me. Let's see. And then the last one I have is sometimes what happens in certain, you know, I even be honest, it happens a lot in the Hebrew Israelite community. One scripture, and then it'll just be ran away with, right? So this is one reason why I'm gonna say we need to have a wealth of evidence to try to make these points that some of these brothers are trying to make. Once again, I don't have no affiliation with none of the people, so whatever they're doing on their YouTube channel, God bless them. You understand what I'm saying? But I don't have no. It's like what's the thing you say? No relation whatsoever to any of these dudes. So like I said, I am a army of one, and that's what I'm doing. All right. So this is 2 Samuel 1:17 through 19, and it said, "And David lamented with this lamentation over Saul and over Jonathan, his son. Also, he bade them teach the children of Judah the use of the bow. Behold, it is written in the book of Jasher." Okay, now, if you have ever seen that 12 tribes chart, then you know that the belief amongst the Israelite community, for the most part, well, yeah, for pretty much everybody, is Judah is the so-called Black African American. Okay, so if I was to try to disprove that was true, I could take 2 Samuel and say, I don't know no niggas that know how to shoot a bow and arrow. My dad didn't teach me how to shoot a bow. We can't be Judah. You see how easily it works if I just want to take one little verse and then try to apply it for like centuries and millennium? It just don't work that way. So we got to make sure that we're doing a better job of communicating those things, because you know, once again, you could either turn people off or people won't believe you because you don't have enough support to what you're saying. Okay, so let's go ahead and get right into the lesson for the night. All right, personal study questions. This is something you can just think about on your own. All right, do Christians follow the words of Paul more than Jesus? Okay, so once again, the gospel of Jesus: Matthew, Mark, Luke, John. All right, Paul, Acts, Romans, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, 1st, 2nd Thessalonians, Hebrews, what else? A lot of the New Testament. I believe Revelations was supposedly written by Paul too. So might be something to pay attention to see what books and what exact doctrine is your church or wherever you're listening to speaking about. So yeah, it's something to be careful of, to make sure if you're calling yourself a Christian, you want to make sure you're following the words of Jesus way more than Paul. And whatever Jesus said overrides whatever Paul had to say. And if you don't believe that, then I don't know how you could be a Christian. But once again, I ain't here to beat up on nobody's faith or religion. Let's see. The second one is, how would God want us to view politics? I have my opinion, right? But since I leave this as a personal study question, I might answer it towards the end or whatnot. But this is something that you can just, like I said, study on your own. All right, so let's keep going. All right, once again, my main sources are going to be the Amplified Bible, the complete 54-book Apocrypha, which makes a nice number of 120 when you add up the 66 in the Amplified Bible and the 54 in the Apocrypha. I'll also be using the Tanakh because it has not the original Hebrew, but the more modern Hebrew, which still gives you a pretty decent, what am I trying to say? A pretty decent translation sometimes. It's not as deep as like the Paleo Hebrew or the Assyrian Hebrew, but it's still pretty decent. And of course, the Antiquities of the Jews by Flavius Josephus, which is, like I said, one of the oldest, in my opinion, confirmations of biblical teachings, biblical writings, and things like that. Because the other thing, like I said, we got to get out of our head is this book is just a book. It's not. I mean, we can call it the Bible. That's for so everybody will understand that we're talking about the same thing. But you do understand there was no Genesis, there was no Exodus. That's the names they placed to the book. You understand what I'm saying? It was just a holy text, or a whole, it was just written, and the priest or the scribes just kept track of it. So we got to kind of start to break that up. There is no First Corinthians, all those type of ways. That was just used so that we could get more order, and it would be system. Instead of saying, hey, could you find that scripture about this? It's like, okay, we'll go to First Corinthians chapter. See what I'm saying? So it was used as an organizational tool. Yeah, I know I'm drinking Wendy's lemonade tonight, so it's a interesting evening to say the least. Let's get right into it. Shem. All right, so Shem was the eldest son of Noah and the progenitor of the Semitic races. All right, that's going to be strong 80-35, and that's Shem right there in the Hebrew. And it says all the major characters and stories in the Bible after the flood only refer to the line of Shem. All right. If you remember Shem and his brother Japheth covered Noah's nakedness and were blessed by Noah. All right. Japheth was given the blessing of enlargement, but would dwell in the tents of Shem. Okay. The book of Jasher says that Shem taught Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob about the laws of God. Okay, so real quick, I just want to talk about that because I didn't get a chance to talk about it last week. Once again, if you just tuned back in, I appreciate you checking back in, because now I muted myself because when I had the music and stuff playing earlier, I wasn't trying to be talking and singing in the background, and I forgot to unmute myself. So apologies for that, but I'm back. So let's talk about this and these blessings that they were given real quick, because Japheth, if you didn't watch the last show, I did it basically to prove that Japheth is the progenitor of what we call the Indo-European races. That is all of Europe, Indian people. I'm not sure about Chinese, but some places say Chinese are Ham. Some people say Chinese people are Japheth. I don't know. God bless the Chinese, but I don't know. I didn't see a specific thing referencing them to this point in the Bible. Okay, so when it talks about enlargement, right? Because this is one thing I think I want to say a lot of people get confused, but I did something I just wanted to clear up. When it talks about Japheth being an enlarger, like that was his blessing, that he be enlarged in the earth. So if you look at European culture, if you look at them historically, number one, where the majority of your conquerors come from, right? Where the majority of the colonizers come from, let's just be honest, right? There are English colonies, French colonies, Dutch colonies, maybe a couple of German colonies, I'm not quite sure, Portuguese colonies. I don't think the Italians colonized. So shout out to the Italians for I don't think colonizing. They might have colonized. I don't know if you count Sicily or anything like that. But anyway, like outside, I don't think there's like nobody in Africa. I don't think there's an Italian colony in Africa or an Italian colony in South America or anywhere else, or in like Asia somewhere, right? So that enlargement, I think, makes a lot of sense, right? Because if you look at like number one, we doing this podcast, right? All right, using StreamYard, okay. Pretty sure if I go to the CEO of StreamYard, it's gonna be somebody. It's gonna be Japheth again. All right, like I said, I am not gonna use the term white, black. I'm gonna try not to. I'm still gonna use nigga though. I love that word. I'm sorry. I'm never getting rid of nigga. But if you think about like what that means to enlarge, like just look at America, right? You had somebody like Henry Ford, all right, decided to make. He said, you know what, horses ain't good enough, right? I gotta make a moving horse and buggy. And then all of a sudden we look at 100 years later, we got all these cars everywhere. We got multiple types of cars, and you look at all the heads of all these car industries, Japheth. You know, the other part of Japheth, or the other way that it could be interpreted, is beauty. So the other part of that I say is, well, look at what you're wearing. What you got on your feet? Nikes. Who's the head of Nike? Phil Knight. Who is he? Japheth. Oh, you want something a little fancy? You got on some Balenciagas, Japheth. You have on some Gucci, Japheth. You have on some Louis Vuitton, Japheth. So you go to the grocery store, Kroger, Japheth. You go to Walmart, Japheth, Chick-fil-A. It don't matter. Like, to me, that is his blessing in the earth. Like, a lot of people say, oh no, that's white supremacy. That's this. Call it what you want to. I'm just saying, to me, this is biblical prophecy playing itself out. But the part that should bring some people some sort of relief is, where does it say that Japheth will dwell? He will dwell in the tents of Shem. So the way I view it, now once again, I've already told you multiple times how to view my opinions or the things I say. So just in case you forgot, there it is, man. All the way at the bottom, the Kung Fu Hebrew. So the only way that any of this stuff makes sense, and even if you want to believe the only way that God could possibly be real, is it has to balance itself out. So if Japheth got all of this enlarger energy, he going and he colonizing and he conquering and he making all these big companies, all the cell phone companies and a media company. I mean, everything is Japheth, right? And then it says that he'll dwell in the tents of Shem. So how I look at that is like, well, Japheth might have the enlarger, but the tents of Shem can also, a tent is what? A house, right? The house of Shem. And what is the house? Sometimes seen as the temple, right? So God, it's like, y'all got the enlarger, but and it's been proven throughout history, right? That y'all would dwell in the tents of Shem, because what was going on in Europe? You had Thor, you had Zeus, you had all the other Odin, all the Norse gods, the Roman gods. And then what happened? Some way, somehow, Emperor Constantine, even though I don't believe anything he said, brought Christianity to Europe. And then look at it now, 75% of the planet is dwelling in the tents of Shem. So I feel like that's the only way it balances out, because it's almost like if we not Shem, whew, I mean, that's cruelty to me. But you also got to understand that everybody has a role to play, because we're supposed to be, and I'll get to that a lot later, but when I get into the tents of Shem, but that's the way I view that. But I did just want to kind of retouch what I was talking about last week, because I wasn't in the mood last week, because, I was late and all the rest of that stuff. I'm going to get it together. It's been a while. I'm a little rusty at my podcast stuff, but I'm going to get back better. So that's what I believe. The tents of Shem have to mean that, if you read the Bible, he says he is the God of Israel. Okay, so we ain't got to Israel yet, but in the tents of Shem, when Noah's talking about God, when Adam was talking to God, there has to be some sort of relation. All right, so let's keep going. All right, the Code of Hammurabi was created by the 6th Babylonian king of the Amorite dynasty. Okay, Amorites, from the Ham episode, descend from Emer, the 4th son of Canaan. And then there's also a possible connection to Shem and their sun god and the god of justice named Shamash. And I've already showed you in other shows how sometimes the Noah's sons or Noah or even Adam, sometimes they are perceived or used in the context of being a god. Okay. When I was in high school, I learned about the Code of Hammurabi. That was the eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth, whatever it was, basically saying like, you steal, somebody gonna cut your hand off, all that type of stuff. So we learned about the Code of Hammurabi. And but this was also being found in the Mosaic Law. That's Leviticus 24:19 verses 21. And also the Messiah said it, in Matthew 5:38. Okay, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar brought Israel into their 3rd captivity. All right, that's after the Egyptian, Assyrian. So the Babylonian would have been the 3rd. So this is the empire that talked about that. And right here, this is called the Louvre stele. Once again, that is Japheth again, right? Because it's in the Louvre, right? It's in the museum in France. That's that enlarger energy again. He ain't have nothing to do with writing it. He ain't had nothing to do with Babylon. He ain't have nothing to do with any of it. But what is it called? The Louvre stele, or stele. I don't know how you say Stele, but that's what that is. And that's the one of the oldest forms of the Code of Hammurabi. available. Okay. All right. So once again, we got a Google break. So I'm gonna go ahead and let that play for about 10 seconds, and then I'm gonna be right back because I see the people watching, so I ain't gonna keep it too long. So here we go.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go.
Okay.
Let's go. Let's go.
Okay.
All right. So just real quick, So when I do the Google break, I know you might see the colors and things like that, and no, that's not like a pride thing because before it got associated with that community or whatnot, it was a symbol that God would no longer destroy the earth. So the rainbow is not a terrible thing, man. It's actually a good thing, and we can't let 2023 change our perception of the rainbow. So, and plus, it was the closest thing I could get to Google letters. So it is what it is. If you look at Google got a couple of colors. So, hey, I use rainbow, whatever. All right, let's get right into it, man. Asher, all right. Asher is Strong's H804. It says his name means a step with the root in H833, which means to go forward or to prosper, okay? The Assyrians come from the line of Asher, all right? Josephus confirmed this in Antiquities of the Jews, book 1, chapter 6, section 4. And it says the Assyrian Empire was located in mostly modern-day Iraq. So I want you to look at what they say an Assyrian look like, okay? So you kind of see, I guess, I don't know if you say lock, braids, whatever, beard, shooting a bow and arrow, you can kind of see what they look like a little bit. But this kind of also goes back to, I like to point out that everything comes out of this book, okay? Because that was one point that I've been trying to make for a while. Like, that's a main focus of this show, is to kind of show you that everything comes out of this book. Because I remember being in Mr. Malden's world history class, and I said, sir, what is the difference between a Syrian and an Assyrian? And he told me an ass. And I was like, okay, I mean, you didn't answer the question. But once again, historically, right? If we know where these people come from, if we know their lineage, that's the reason why I said in the first show how important lineages are, okay? Because lineages leave receipts that you exist, okay? Like, for example, there are plenty Solomons out there, right? But if we were doing this biblically, I'd be Solomon, son of Jimmy. Shit, who, it'd be like, who was begotten by Luther. And I don't know who my great granddaddy is. I remember we had it at a family reunion one time, but whoever my great granddaddy is, whoever begot him, now we can kind of separate ourselves. So that's the reason why the Bible left so many receipts. Otherwise, we end up being right where we are right now, and we can't even really prove these people existed. We'll talk about this Assyrian Empire. We're going to get into some other big empires in world history, but nobody ever really talks about the root of where these people come from. All right. Aram, which means exalted, is Strong's H758. Once again, if you haven't been watching the show, the Strong number can be found in your blueletterbible.org. This is the number associated when this was translated. Okay, so it takes you to the original, either the Greek, I believe, and then it translated into the context of how they wanted to be used. Also, Aram is also where the Aramaic comes in. Okay, so that was one of the second one is some of the oldest translations of the Bible were translated from ancient Aramaic. All right, so this is Aram. Okay, once again, you can kind of look at the picture up at the top. Those were colored in, so that's not what the original looks like, but they did add color to it. You can tell me if that doesn't look right to you, but that color was added later. And then, like I said, Josephus refers to them as the Aramites, which the Greeks called the Syrians. So I just talked about the Assyrians being from Asher and the Syrians being from Aram. They were both Shem's sons, okay? Elam, My bad, Elam, I can't read tonight. Strong's H5867, which means eternity. All right. Cyrus, Darius, Xerxes, and Artaxerxes are some of the most famous rulers of the Persian Empire. All right. So out of Elam, you get the Elamites, right? But once again, Josephus says that the Persians derive from them as well. Okay. So Elamites, Persians. Okay. So we got Persians, Assyrians, Syrians. These are Semitic people. All right. Arphaxad. All right. This is the third son of Shem, whose name means I shall fail as the breast. I don't know what that means, but this is Strong's 8775. All right, Josephus said in the Antiquities of Jews, Book 1, Chapter 6, Section 4, from Arphaxad come the Chaldeans by the Greeks or the Arphaxadites, okay? So, once again, if you go on the blueletterbible.org, you will see the Descendants' Hebrew Chaldee lexicon, all right, and it says that they occupy the area of Assyria close to Armenia. So when you start talking about the Chaldees and things like that, I think that might have had to do with Abraham. These are the people they're referring to. This is the lineage of Arphaxad. Lud, okay, so Lud, whose name means, wait a minute, I think I might have messed up right there, but Lud, whose name means I can't read, was the fourth son of Shem and the progenitor of the Lydians. All right, that's Strong's number H3865. Okay, the Lydians settled in Asia Minor and North Africa and were accustomed to fight with the bow and arrows. Okay, right there, if you look, there's a picture of Lydia and three of their main places. Sardis, I think, would probably be the one. Ephesus, that's probably where the Ephesians came out of. But once again, this is just what that is. And then also right there, that is a coin. Allegedly, you can Google it. But they say that the Lydian Empire or the descendants of Lud created the first mint. And there's a picture of one of their gold coins. Eber, all right. Eber is H5677, was the son of Salah and the great-grandson of Shem. Eber means the region beyond or region across a stream or sea. All right, this is where the term Hebrews come from. And once again, like I said, nobody on the planet is fighting for the term Hebrew. So I just put two pictures of two American brothers because we'll get into the Hebrew term a little bit later, okay? Now I got to talk about the Arab slave trade because I know people are saying, wait, he just put up pictures of two black guys from America and he's calling them Hebrews and he calls himself a Hebrew. Well, let's figure out how this could have possibly happened, okay? So first thing we got to do is we want to talk about how we get from Israel or how we get from the Middle East to America. It's very simple. The Arab slave trade, right? The 9th century historian, Yaqubi, right? And once again, if you don't know Yaqubi, that is Arabic for Jacob, which is ironic, stated that the Arabs, explored black slaves belonging to the Mira, Zagawa, Marua, and other black races, okay, who are near to them and whom they capture. I hear that the black kings sell blacks without pretext and without war. And then that comes from Gordon. His book is Slavery in the Arab World, okay? So this is what that 9th century historian said. But here we go. Many slaves were sent through European slave castles, which are in present-day Ghana. I went to Ghana maybe about a year, November of 2021, okay? And I believe we saw one of the slave castles where it's like the entrance, and once you went through kind of sort of the door, the mouth of the place, it will basically take you to the sea. And a lot of these slave castles were in what's present-day Ghana, okay? And then if you look at the map, okay, the routes would send slaves from the Middle East and Egypt to the slave coast. The slave coast was identified as being Togo, Benin, and Western Nigeria. Okay, so in between, you got to remember, we're going to get into it, but Israel had two captivities. They had an Assyrian captivity, and then they had a Babylonian captivity. Now, after they were taken in captivity, they never went back. Okay, the second time, they never went back. Okay, And then this is when they just get scattered all across the place. So this is the part where I believe that the majority of the slaves were then sent to West Africa, not East Africa, not North Africa, but West Africa. And I'll explain that in a second, okay? Because we have to, like, it's the only thing to me that makes sense when you really start to think about this, okay? Because the majority of the transatlantic slave trade happened from where? Out of West Africa, okay? So it only makes sense that if a group of people were trying to get out, get the people out from what up, Birdie, man? Appreciate you checking in there, big homie. So it only makes sense that if you wanted to get a group of people out of an area that you wanted, you would then enslave them, ship them to the other side of the continent. And then once we get to the transatlantic slave trade, right, then it's like we got to think about this for a second. Nothing else makes sense, and I'll explain to you why. Because I've already explained to you who the descendants of Ham are, who the descendants of Shem are, and who the descendants of Japheth are. So if you look at that, you have to, let's go to the European real quick, right? Where else? Let's go into the age of exploration, as my homie Birdie likes to say. In 1490, we learned in 1492, Christopher Columbus sailed the ocean blue. All right. And I believe he was in 3 boats, the Nina, the Pinta, and the Santa Maria, right? I believe that's what we learned. Now, plenty of explorers. Once again, all the explorers, whose lineage do they belong to? Japheth, Christopher Columbus, not Leonardo da Vinci, Magellan, Japheth, Hernando Cortez, Japheth, Amerigo Vespucci, Hernando de Soto, all of them Japheth. They all come from the same line from the Bible, right? But you know what none of those explorers found anytime they left Europe? Other so-called white people, okay? It was like, that's the one thing about Japheth. Japheth is confined to Europe. That's the reason why they had to colonize. And honestly, once again, I'm going to give you my opinion. My opinion is this is one of those quote unquote real reasons behind the age of exploration, because you got to think about it. And let me show you this little map that I created, right? And maybe it'll make it make more sense for you, right? So check out this map. If you look at where Japheth is, right, and take out what we consider the United States and Canada right now. Anytime they went south, they found black and brown people. Anytime they went west, they found black and brown people. When they went north, they found white people. So that's the reason why they decided, well, when we went east, south, it was nothing but black and brown people. But when we go north, we found more people that I don't want to say look like us, but yeah, more white people, right? So then when they wanted to go to the east, right, that's the transatlantic, they said they were trying to find the West Indies. In my opinion, they were trying to see was basically anywhere on the planet are there indigenous white people, right? Think about that. No, let me pull the map back up one more time. Where on earth are white people? Did, like, the whole time during the age of exploration, Christopher Columbus never said, "Oh yeah, we went over there and we found a group of savage white people." You know what I'm saying? It never happened. So that's the main reason why I believe that you had all the colonization, the age of exploration. I'm gonna get back into the Renaissance era and all that other stuff too, but it's the only thing that makes sense in my brain, right? And once again, if you're a so-called white person, you shouldn't feel bad about that, because guess what? Y'all got the enlarger energy. Nothing to be ashamed of, right? And everything your ancestors did just fulfill biblical prophecy, because guess what? If they didn't do everything they said they would do, it would only mean the book ain't true. So, you gotta try to take that with a grain of salt. You understand? Because we're talking about the Bible. So yes, there was enslavement. There was all the other things that we know was happening, right? But once again, that enslavement was what? It was prophesied in the book of Isaiah. It was prophesied. It was told to Abraham. We ain't even got to them people yet, but it's in the book that tells you this stuff is gonna happen. So when somebody fulfills a prophecy, I mean, you can hate them if you want to. However, it at least tells you that you know what I mean? Oh, shout out to nephew checking in, man. But it should let you know that this is how this goes. You know what I mean? You should kind of understand where everybody kind of falls into place. All right. So the quick way I got to kind of explain this real quick is a now versus then thing, because once again, people will say, ain't no black people in Israel, ain't no black people in the Middle East, blah, blah. Okay, let me give you an example in America, right? So I put the perception of nationalities can change in a relatively short amount of time. In less than 300 years, the perception of a quote-unquote American has drastically changed, all right? And there are three factors necessary to accomplish this level of change. Number one, you got to colonize or you got to resettle the native population. Number two, you got to control the education and religion, because guess what? If you can control the education, then you can teach what their descendants will know. You can control what their mind, you can basically control them, because they won't know what happened in the past. You can say, oh, you're not from here, you're from wherever I decide I want you to be from, right? The second thing is to control religion. If I can attach God to it and I can say, God told me this is who you are, this is why, then it actually adds a whole nother emphasis. So now your spiritual beliefs are now attached to a certain nationality or a certain region, or however they want to try to portray. The third one is control of infrastructure, including the military, government, and logistics. Basically, if you got the military, the people ain't rebelling. Number two, you control the government. What they gonna do? You control you make the laws and the logistics, the ports at the time. Basically, you controlling the money. You controlling the way people move. You control all the infrastructure, the roads, the railroads. Everything is under your control. That's a very simple way. So if we went back 300-400 years, somebody said, hey, what do people in America look like? You definitely pick the bottom picture, right? If we ask people, what does an American look like now? You go to the top picture. All right. Now, I'm going to go ahead and give a disclaimer before I do this next slide. Argue with your history books, because I ain't got nothing to do with this next slide. All right. Here we go. Here's another example, Israel, right? So if you didn't know, the state of Israel, which is what they decided to be called, they didn't want to be called just Israel. Like, you know, some people, it's just China. It's not the state of China, the state of Russia, the state of India. They wanted to be called the state of Israel, was established in 1948. Okay, so let's count. 52, 20, 75 years ago, the state of Israel was established, okay? After being ruled by the Ottoman Empire since the late 14th century. Who was the Ottoman Empire? Arabs. You understand what I'm saying? That's who was there. So when people be like Palestine and all that other stuff, to be honest with you, Palestine has a much better claim to that area than the people who live there right now, because at least Palestine could say they was there for thousands of years. Because if you watch the first show, you know who is Palestine. Those are the descendants of the Philistines, okay? Plus, mixed with some Arabs, because that's what they do, okay? They mix. So, let's check this out, all right? So, 1948, 75 years ago, this is when the state of Israel was established. After the British mandate for Palestine, right, the Arab-Israeli War was fought in 1948. 1 year later, over 700,000 Palestinians were expelled or fled Israel, while over 260,000 Jews immigrated to Israel. All right. In 1949, they were admitted into the UN. They also had the Zionist movement of the 1800s, and over 1.2 Jewish refugees relocating to Israel between 1948 to 1970. The makeover was complete. Okay, because if you look at that top picture, explain to me how the top picture matches your ancestors in the bottom picture. This is a picture, I believe, when the Israelites were taken into captivity by the either the Babylonians or the Assyrians, right? Because you got to remember, the reason why Israel does not have receipts is because it's against their religion to make graven images. So you won't see Israelite paintings. You won't see Israelite, you won't see like the images that we are famous with from like the Renaissance time. You won't see any of that, right? Because it was against their religion. Oh, shout out to Skissy checking in. I appreciate it. Yeah, my bad. I jacked up the first 7 minutes because I was on mute, but it's all good. So if you go back and watch it, just fast forward to about like 7 minutes because I was just sitting here on mute, but it's all good. So once again, if you look at the people in the bottom picture, you can tell me for yourself if you think those people in the bottom picture look like the people in the top picture. Once again, argue with your history books because we've already seen in 75 years how the perception of just one area of the world, like everybody out, I know they got the Palestine thing and then they have some other things going on, but the perception of Israel, once again, you got to ask yourself some questions. And what have I said in my other podcast? People will tell on themselves. Do they call themselves Israelites? No. They call themselves what? Israelis. Okay? So, once again, if these are the people in the book, right? These are the people in the book, right? You got to ask yourself a couple of questions. What y'all waiting on to build that temple? Like, what we waiting on? Because if you look in Revelations and you believe in that, right? When the temple is rebuilt, that's when everything's supposed to pop off. So what y'all waiting on? It ain't like they ain't got the money. We already know the U.S. sent them a whole bunch of money, but I'm not gonna get political. But these are things we gotta start thinking because you gotta think about this, man. Like in 75 years, they got a whole country basically handed to them with the help of the British Empire, right? So just take a second back to take all that in. Once again, you see what you follow the Torah, you are a Jew. That does not make you an Israelite. There are differences, okay? I'm going to get into those differences when we start getting to those people. But once again, this is something that's got to be discussed because you got to be able to explain through historical, through the Bible, through everything, how. You got taken into Babylonian captivity, right? You got taken into Assyrian captivity, and then your ancestors went where? Explain to me why everybody in the so-called Isle of Gentiles favors you versus, I could do this all day, but let's keep going. So these are what Semitic people look like. So if you look at the older picture, these are some Arab people. Let me take my little logo down for a second so you can see that man's face, right? This is what Semitic people look like, right? That is the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. That guy right there is a Nigerian, a Ghanaian rapper. Everybody knows LeBron James. But if you do the comparison of the ancient people to the ones, like if you do left to right, it should be a pretty close resemblance to those people, right? So it's not like I'm making a big stretch by saying Semitic people should all be brown. If you're not brown and you're claiming the Semite, you need to go ahead and start begotten. It was begotten by who to get you to somebody that you can have a receipt from. Because this is the reason why, like when it starts, and I'm gonna talk about Israel a little bit later, but the reason why I put these people up here is because once again, I'm gonna put the map up here. Okay. Let's look at where all these people are. All right. So look at where Shem is, right? So now let's look at the world. Okay. You got Shem covering the Middle East. Okay. Now, if you look at where Shem is, that would also cover the northern part of Africa, some parts of Western Africa as well. It also kind of covers the southern half of the United States, Mexico, the Caribbean, places like that. So if you want to start tracing Shem outside of the Middle East, you also got to follow the slave trade. So where did the slave trade go? It ended up in West Africa. So what does that mean? There's got to be a lot of Israelite descendants in West Africa. It only makes sense. I would ask anybody who's ever done, even though I wouldn't tell you to do it, if you've ever done one of those DNA services, where they say you're from, more than likely it's West Africa somewhere. I haven't seen nobody get no Kenyas, Ethiopia, Eritrea. I don't normally see that Somalia. I ain't never seen that. I see Ghana, Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Cameroon. So to me, the facts speak for themselves, right? And if you follow the slave trade, where did the slave trade go? It went to Brazil, probably more than any other place on the planet. It went all throughout the Caribbean, Jamaica, Haiti, Dominican Republic, all throughout there, Barbados, Bahamas, and of course the United States. So when I do get to my Jacob and Esau and Israel show, I will break that down. But I would also say, at this point, I think it's almost impossible to identify who's who, and I will get to that when I get to it. I think we can for sure say Israelite, possibly, right? Semite, definitely, right? But to identify the tribes based on the information we were given in the book, I think it's a little difficult. We might be able to claim Judah based on Deuteronomy, based on Isaiah especially, but once again, that would still be speculation at this point. So look on the left, look on the right. This is what Semitic people look like. Like it shouldn't even be up for debate. You know what I mean? All right. So next time, man, I'm going to my boy Abraham. All right. And Abraham is a Semitic. He comes from the line of Shem. All right. He's probably the next major figure that we've got to talk about. All right. And next week, I will be talking about Abraham. I got a couple of stories that I'm probably about 99% sure you've never heard of. Okay. Because there's one story about Abraham that is very familiar to the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. All right. So you should know that story if you've been going to any church. Right. And he's got another quote about, one of my favorite things as a man is getting my plate brung and all of that good stuff. So he's got some things about getting a plate and good women and all that good stuff. So it's a very couple of good, interesting stories. And we're going to get into the life of Abraham because I want you to start to see the similarities as we go. Abraham, Isaac, then Jacob, right? I want you to be able to see the similarities in some of their lives, man. The lion to the kings about who their wife was and all these other different things, man. There's a lot of similarities between them. So I'll definitely get into that. All right. So like I said, next week, 7:00, not on mute. I will definitely be here on time again. Like I said, apologies about the beginning. Like I said, I'm just getting used to, being back in the swing of things, doing it all by myself with the podcast, stuff like that. I hope you learned something tonight. I hope, once again, as I keep trying to show mountains and mountains of evidence, not necessarily my words, like I said, because it's my opinion, I will tell you. But basically, you have to understand that everything on this entire planet derives from the Bible, and that is the purpose of this show. And I say purpose, not the dolphin. That's the purpose of this show. That I don't know if I'm gonna have 40 shows exactly, but we'll see. But to prove that everything has an origin, because regardless what anybody says, everything is named something for a reason. Like you can't explain why a tiger is named a tiger, except for you just knew it was always called a tiger. But if you just keep going back, who was the first person to ever call it a tiger? Then if you believe in the book, who was it? Adam, right? So even your scientists, your archaeologists, whoever, they can't explain why these things have the names that they have. So sometimes if there is no explanation, I will take the Bible. Same way all these cities and place, and they call themselves, Greeks and Romans and Egyptians and whoever, right? Where do all these names originally go? What was the name before Egypt? What was the name before that? What was the name before that? Probably goes back to one of these biblical characters, somebody's son, somebody's begot, so and so and so, and there you go. Because when I get to talk about Abraham, I believe in between here I can actually explain biblically why Africa is called Africa. Okay, because many people will give you different names. I mean, not different names, but they'll give you different reasoning. But if you tune in the next week's show, a little, I forget what they call it, a little hook, a little kind of like a little teaser. If you tune in next week, I'm going to explain to you biblically why Africa is called Africa. All right. If you want, you can follow me at the Come Through Hebrew on Twitter. You can go sign up at www.libretv.co. Follow Libre TV on YouTube. Or if you want to ask me a direct question, or if you don't like what I'm talking about, that's fine too. kungfuhebrew@yahoo.com for any of your questions, comments, or concerns. All right. And until next time, man, a big shalawamo to all my UAB out there. Once again, that is all my unaffiliated brews. All right. And I know shalawamo is this, it's, you know, we always got to change stuff. You know, if you say what's up, people say sup, you know, what's happening. You know, you got to change up a little bit. So I know the brothers might say shalom, but I'm going to throw an O on the end, you know what I mean, just to change it up and be separate again, all right? So until next week, man, I've been the Kung Fu Hebrew. Peace. Shalom. Shabbat.